The winter of 2009 should have been perfect for Jack Morrison and his daughter. They had 4 days alone at the family cabin, a tradition they'd kept since Lily was old enough to make the hike. But when search teams finally found them 15 years later at the bottom of an old well, the friendship bracelet on Lily's wrist told a different story than the one everyone believed. November 23, 2009. Medicine Bow Mountains, Wyoming. Jack Morrison packed the truck while 12-year-old Lily double-checked her backpack in the driveway. Math homework, her favorite book, the disposable camera she'd begged for at Walmart. Their Thanksgiving tradition was sacred. Just father and daughter at the mountain cabin while Michelle attended her annual medical conference. This year she was in Chicago, promising to join them Friday if the flights cooperated. She kissed them both goodbye at 6 a.m., told Lily to take pictures of everything, told Jack to actually relax for once. Normal family, normal goodbye, the kind you don't memorize because you assume there'll be thousands more. The drive from Laramie took 3 hours in good weather. Jack stopped at the Elk Mountain exit for gas and supplies. The Flying J station still has the receipt in their archived files. 2:34 p.m., pump 7, $47.82. Gas, 2 hot chocolates, marshmallows, batteries, and that disposable camera Lily had wanted. The clerk, Rosie Hendricks, 63, remembered them because Lily was trying to teach her father a card trick while they waited. She kept laughing every time he dropped the cards, Rosie told investigators. Said her dad might be good with animals, but he had stupid fingers for magic. Jack had laughed too, ruffled his daughter's hair, said something about her getting the smart genes from her mother. The Morrison cabin sat at 8,200 feet elevation on the north face of Sheep Mountain. 22 miles from the main highway, the last 7 on a dirt road that turned into a mud trap in rain and a death trap in snow. 5 other cabins dotted the same mountain, but by late November only one other family remained. Frank and Janet Dalton, recent retirees from Denver who'd bought the old Henley place 2 years back. Their cabin sat 600 yards uphill, visible through the pines when the leaves were down, close enough to see chimney smoke, far enough to maintain the illusion of wilderness solitude. But here's what changes everything about that day. At 4:47 p.m., Frank Dalton was at the Mountain View Hardware in Centennial, 70 miles away. Security footage showed him buying rope, a tarp, and industrial bleach. He paid cash, which wasn't unusual for Frank, but the timing was. He told his wife Janet he was checking their Denver house that day, wouldn't be back until late. The Denver house that they'd actually sold 6 months earlier, a detail Janet wouldn't admit she knew until 15 years later. Jack and Lily reached the cabin just before sunset. The landline worked long enough for Jack to call Michelle's hotel in Chicago. 3 minutes, 17 seconds, the phone company records show. Made it safe. Lily's already planning tomorrow's hike. She says the turkey better be perfect or she's becoming vegetarian. Michelle heard Lily laughing in the background, shouting something about catching a bigger fish than last year. She told them she loved them, to be careful, to take pictures. Normal conversation, forgettable in its ordinariness, except it was the last time she'd hear their voices. Frank Dalton returned to his cabin at 11:30 p.m. that night. Janet was already in bed, or pretending to be. She'd later claimed she heard nothing unusual, but her cell phone records showed she'd been texting her sister in Florida until 2 a.m. "Frank's acting strange again," one message read. "That look in his eyes." Her sister had replied, "Leave him. Come to Florida." Janet's response, "Can't." You know why. Tuesday, November 24th. The temperature dropped overnight, but the sky stayed clear. Perfect hiking weather if you dressed right. At 10 a.m., Frank Dalton walked down to the Morrison cabin. Jack was splitting wood out back. Lily was building a snowman even though there was barely enough snow. Frank offered to help with the wood. Jack accepted. They worked for an hour, maybe more. This was all according to Frank's statement, given 3 days later when the search began. He said they'd talked about normal things. The weather, the Broncos' terrible season, whether the access road would hold up through winter. He said Lily had brought them both hot chocolate, made some joke about her dad being too old for manual labor. But Tommy Chen, who owned the cabin 2 lots over and had come up briefly to check his pipes, saw something different. He saw Frank and Jack near the woodpile, but their body language was wrong. Jack kept stepping back, hands raised like he was trying to calm someone down. Frank was holding the axe, gesturing with it while he talked. Tommy didn't think much of it then. Neighbors had disagreements, especially about property lines and shared roads. He went inside his own cabin, didn't come out again until he left an hour later. By then, both men were gone. The last verified sighting of Jack and Lily Morrison alive was at 2:15 p.m. Tuesday. Margaret Vasquez, hiking the Ridge Trail with her husband, saw them on the lower path heading toward Copper Creek. Lily was wearing a bright pink coat, carrying a walking stick she'd decorated with ribbons. Jack had a backpack, nothing unusual for a day hike. They waved, called out Happy Tuesday, continued down the trail. Margaret took a photo of the valley that inadvertently caught them in the distance, two small figures against the snow. That photo would become evidence, studied and enhanced and argued over for years. What happened next remained a mystery for 15 years. Michelle called Tuesday night, got no answer, assumed the phone was out again. It happened all the time up there. Wednesday came and went. She tried again. Still nothing. By Thursday afternoon, Thanksgiving Day, she was worried enough to call the sheriff's department from Chicago. Deputy Ron Velez knew the mountain well, promised to check Friday morning. But Thursday night brought 14 inches of snow with more coming. Velez made it as far as the lower switchback before his truck got stuck. He hiked the remaining 2 miles. The Morrison cabin was locked, Jack's truck parked in its usual spot, covered in snow but with no snow underneath. It hadn't moved since before the storm. Velez used the spare key from under the fake rock. Inside, cold fireplace, beds unmade, 2 plates with half-eaten sandwiches on the table, Tuesday's date on a newspaper still folded to the crossword. Lily's math homework spread across the couch, her pencil on the floor like she'd dropped it suddenly. No signs of struggle, no blood, no note. Just absence. The search began within hours. 20 volunteers became 50, then 200. Dogs, helicopters, grid patterns through the forest. The snow kept falling, covering tracks, hiding paths, making everything white and silent and impossible. They searched for 9 days before scaling back. The official theory: Jack and Lily had gone hiking and gotten lost when the storm hit. It happened every year in these mountains. Bodies turned up in spring, sometimes years later, preserved by cold. Frank and Janet Dalton were helpful during the search. Coffee for volunteers, sandwiches, local knowledge about trails and dangerous spots. Frank told investigators he'd seen Jack splitting wood Tuesday, heard Lily laughing, nothing unusual. "Wish I'd checked on them Wednesday," he said, "but you respect people's privacy up here." Janet nodded along, agreed with everything, the perfect supportive wife. They left for Florida 2 weeks later, said the tragedy had ruined the mountains for them. Sold their cabin the next spring, never came back to Wyoming. Michelle Morrison never accepted the lost hiker theory. Jack was too experienced, too careful, especially with Lily. She hired private investigators, pushed for more searches, appeared on 3 different missing person shows. Nothing. The case went cold. She moved to Portland in 2011, trying to escape the memories. The Morrison cabin sat empty for 3 years before the bank foreclosed. A developer bought it in 2014, planned to renovate, but the market crashed and it sat empty again. Then came the wildfire. August 2024. The Cedar Ridge fire started from a lightning strike, burned 4,000 acres before crews contained it. The Morrison property was in the black zone, total loss. The cabin reduced to foundation stones and memories. When the assessment team arrived in October to catalog damage and check for contamination, they brought ground-penetrating radar to locate old septic systems and fuel tanks. Standard procedure. What they found was not standard. 40 feet from where the cabin had stood, the radar showed a void, circular, about 4 feet across, 30 feet deep. An old well, probably hand-dug in the 1930s when the original homestead was built. The fire had burned away the wooden cover and decades of overgrowth that had hidden it. Team leader Marcus Webb rappelled down with a camera, expecting to find nothing but rocks and maybe some historical garbage. The first thing his light hit was a human skull. The recovery took 18 hours, 2 bodies preserved by the cold and depth, an adult male and an adolescent female. The pink coat was still visible, the friendship bracelet on her wrist, pink and purple threads braided together, somehow intact after 15 years. But it was the positions that told the story. Jack Morrison hadn't just fallen into the well. He'd been struck in the head first, the skull fracture obvious even after all this time. He'd gone down unconscious or dead. Lily had gone down alive. The medical examiner could tell by the way her fingers were worn, by the scratches in the well's walls. She'd tried to climb out. She'd survived maybe 2 days down there, calling for help that never came. But here's what changed everything. Lily had her father's cell phone. No signal in the mountains, but she'd used it to record videos in the dark. 5 files, dated November 24th and 25th, 2009. The battery had died midway through the 6th. Most were just crying, calling for her mom, saying she was cold. But the second video, time-stamped 9:47 p.m. November 24th, she'd said something that made investigators replay it 20 times. Mr. Dalton put us here. He hit Daddy with something. He said Mrs. Dalton would be mad. He said we saw something we shouldn't see. I don't know what he means. Daddy won't wake up. Frank Dalton had died in 2010 in Florida. Heart attack while deep-sea fishing. Body cremated. Case closed. Convenient. But Janet Dalton was still alive at 73, living in an assisted living facility in Coral Springs. When FBI agents arrived with a warrant for her DNA, she didn't seem surprised. She'd been waiting 15 years for this knock. Under Lily Morrison's fingernails, preserved by the cold and the depth, was DNA. Not Frank's, Janet's. She'd been there. She'd been part of it. When confronted with the evidence, Janet's story crumbled like old paper. Yes, Frank had killed them. Yes, she'd helped move the bodies. But the why was worse than anyone imagined. Jack Morrison had seen something he shouldn't have on November 24th, 2009. While hiking with Lily near Copper Creek, they'd stumbled onto Frank Dalton burying something in the woods. Not something. Someone. Janet's sister, who'd been visiting from Florida, who'd been having an affair with Frank for 2 years, who'd threatened to tell Janet everything if Frank didn't leave with her. Frank had killed her Monday night, driven her body up Tuesday morning, was burying her when Jack and Lily appeared on the trail. Frank had panicked, hit Jack with the shovel, knocked him out. Lily had run, but not far. She wouldn't leave her father. Frank had caught her, and that's when he'd called Janet. Told her everything, gave her a choice, help him clean up or he'd kill himself and leave her with nothing but debt and shame. Janet drove up the mountain. Together they'd dropped Jack and Lily into the well. Together they'd covered it. Together they'd gone back to the search party and served coffee and sandwiches and lied to everyone's faces. Janet's sister had never been reported missing. She told everyone she was moving to Costa Rica, starting fresh. Sent postcards for 6 months, all written by Janet, all mailed by Frank during his business trips. Then silence, explained away as her embracing her new life. The perfect murder, hidden by another murder, hidden by a natural disaster that never happened. Janet Dalton was charged with 2 counts of murder, 1 count of conspiracy, 1 count of tampering with evidence. At her trial, she showed no remorse. "I loved my husband," she said. "You do things for love." The prosecutor asked her about Lily, about the 12-year-old girl who died alone in a well calling for her mother. Janet's response, "She saw too much." Children always see too much. She was convicted on all counts, life without parole. She died in prison 2 years later, stabbed by another inmate who had a 12-year-old daughter of her own. Michelle Morrison buried Jack and Lily in Portland, side by side, matching headstones. She kept the friendship bracelet, had it framed with a photo from that last morning. Jack and Lily in the driveway, him loading the truck, her double-checking her backpack, both unaware they had less than 30 hours left. She started a foundation in Lily's name, dedicated to improving search and rescue technology. Every year on Thanksgiving, she doesn't eat turkey. She drinks hot chocolate and practices card tricks, dropping the cards over and over, laughing through her tears at her stupid fingers. The Morrison cabin site remains empty. The well was filled with concrete, but hikers say if you stand there at dusk, especially in November, you can hear something like a child's voice calling from deep underground. It's just the wind through the valleys, of course. Has to be. But locals take a different trail now, and nobody camps there anymore. Some places remember their tragedies, and some tragedies never really end. In the evidence locker in Laramie, there's still that disposable camera Lily bought at the gas station. 24 pictures taken, the film advance shows, but the camera was never found. Frank probably threw it in a river or burned it with their other belongings. But somewhere in those 24 frames were Lily's last happy moments. Her dad being bad at card tricks, the mountain views, maybe a selfie or two, the kind 12-year-olds always take. Normal photos of a normal trip that became anything but normal. The kind of memories that, if they existed, would show that Tuesday morning before everything went wrong, when a father and daughter were just themselves, together, unaware that Frank Dalton was driving up the mountain with murder already on his mind. The last thing Lily recorded on her father's phone, just before the battery died, was a message for her mother. "Mom, if you find this, Daddy tried to save me. He tried to fight. Tell everyone he was brave, and I'm brave too. I'm not scared anymore. I love you so much. Happy Thanksgiving." The recording cuts off mid-word. The phone died at 11:43 a.m., November 25, 2009. Lily Morrison probably lived another day in the dark, in the cold, at the bottom of a well, waiting for a rescue that had already been called off. She died the way she lived, brave, loving, still believing someone would come. Someone did, just 15 years too late.